you're back for week 2 of our series 1. The series where we are looking at how God uses individuals to make a huge impact on the world and how he can use each one of us to make big impacts of our own. Last week, we took a look at Gideon's story, and this week, it's the lady's turn. This is Esther, an amazing woman in the Bible who found herself in the right place at exactly the right time. You can read her entire story in the Old Testament book of Esther. She's so amazing that she has an entire book in the Bible dedicated just to her story. Alright, so the year was around 450 BC, and King Xerxes ruled the entire Persian Empire. The king needed to choose a new wife. This was quite the process. He ordered that all the young women in the kingdom be taken from their homes, sent to the palace, and given beauty treatments for a year. After a year of prepping and training, they were all sent before the king for him to pick his wife. One of the young women was a beautiful girl named Hadassah, also known as Esther. When Esther was taken from her home, her cousin Mordecai told her not to let anyone know she was Jewish, because at the time, Jewish people were hated and mistrusted. Esther, in all her beauty, stood out from all the other women, and the king picked her to be his queen. During her time as queen, an evil man named Haman, who worked for the king, convinced the king that all the Jews in the kingdom needed to be killed. Remember, Esther was Jewish herself, meaning she would also be killed with all the other Jewish people if her true identity was discovered. When Esther's cousin Mordecai found out about the plan, he sent word to Esther and told her that she needed to speak to the king. His hope was that if the king knew his wife was Jewish, he would change his mind and spare the Jewish people. Esther was afraid, and for good reason, as it was forbidden to go before the king without being invited, even if you were his wife. If the king wanted to see you, he would hold out his scepter and then you were allowed to enter his presence. But if he didn't want to see you, you were to be put to death for daring to ask to see him without being invited. Mordecai told Esther that she had to speak to the king and try to save the Jewish people. Surely God knew what he was doing when he allowed her to be chosen as the queen. Perhaps, said Mordecai, God made you queen for such a time as this. Esther agreed, and she commanded all the Jews, including herself, to fast and pray for 3 days. Then she went and asked to see the king. The king quickly granted her request for a visit. When the king saw Esther, he said to her, "What do you want, Esther? What is your request? I will give it to you, even if it is half the kingdom." Esther simply asked him to join her for a banquet the next evening. He said yes, and eventually she told him everything. The Jewish people were spared, and Haman, the wicked assistant to the king, who put the whole plot in motion, was put to death. And that's the story of Esther, a young woman who stepped up when her moment arrived and saved an entire race of people. Esther's story gives us a lot to think about, but let's focus on a main takeaway and a big question. First, Esther's story is a reminder that sooner or later, everybody needs somebody's help. In Esther's story, it was the Jewish people. They were in a lot of trouble, and they needed Esther's help. They desperately needed her to step up and take action on their behalf. For them, it was literally a matter of life or death. Our world, our country, our state, your city, your school, your family is full of people who need help. All you need to do is pause for a minute or two, and you can probably think of somebody who needs encouragement or prayer, or somebody who needs help with their schoolwork, or is being picked on and needs somebody to stick up for them. You may know somebody who is anxious or depressed. You might know a family who is struggling financially. Maybe somebody you know has lost a loved one recently. The point is this: sooner or later, everybody needs somebody to see what's going on in their lives and do whatever they can to lend a helping hand. Now, the big question Esther's story raises is this: when your moment arrives, will you step up or will you step aside? Esther's moment arrived when her cousin Mordecai said this to her in Esther 4:14. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this? Esther's moment had arrived, and she had a decision to make: to step up and be the person God used to do his work, or step aside and let somebody else do it. She didn't ask for the job. She wasn't praying for an opportunity to save her people. But God put her in the right place at the right time, and she had to decide whether she wanted to step up or step aside. Your moment will come too. In fact, over the course of your life, you will have lots of opportunities to make a difference in this world. Some of those opportunities will be fairly small, and some of them will be pretty big. Some of them will require very little risk on your part, and some of them will take lots of faith. Esther had it all. She was the queen of the entire Persian Empire. Her husband said he'd give her anything she wanted, even if it was half the kingdom. She could have stayed quiet. She could have turned her back and decided speaking up for the Jewish people wasn't worth the risk of losing all of that, or losing her life. But Esther realized God had placed her right where he wanted her, so she refused to step aside. Instead, she chose to be the one to step up.